Well, guys, we have finally reached the end of the long journey that was Attack on Titan. Of course, for me, it was only about a 1.5 year journey since I started reading it in December of 2019, and I have made my way finally to the final chapter with all of you guys. Now, before we get into anything specific, I do want to say that ending a series that is beloved by many people around the world is an extremely difficult thing to do. It's very hard because everybody individually kind of makes up what they interpret the story to be. Again, a quote that I say over and over again on this channel is that one book read by 100 different people is going to be 100 different books. You come at stories with your own perspectives, your own history, and your own way of thinking, and you interpret that into however you interpret that. It doesn't necessarily have to be what the author or Isayama or anybody else has intended it to be. You look at it through your own eyes and your own perspective, and you come up with your answers. And none of that is right or wrong. It's what you interpret the story to be. It's whatever the story means to you. And this can also be why people are so passionate about things when they end, because things are going to end in a way that, loose ends that you had in your mind that you wanted to see fulfilled don't necessarily get fulfilled, or ideas that you had about how everything's going to come full circle don't necessarily do that. And so one of the things when a series ends is I think that you have to look at the series as a whole and appreciate the legacy that the series provided rather than just specifically how the series ends. But I know that's very hard to do because ending a story, sticking the landing, is probably the hardest part of writing, just in general, of any kind of manga or novel or story or TV show or whatever. I mean, how many series have you seen that are absolutely beloved by people all over the world, and when they end, people raged? I mean, the one I think about the most is Game of Thrones. People love that series, one of the greatest series of all time, and when the final season, final episodes came out, people all of a sudden turned on it and decided they hated it, and they hated the ending, and I'm not a Game of Thrones follower myself, so I can't speak for the specifics, but that's just the idea that I'm presenting here. The idea is it's very, very hard to stick the landing in a way that's going to make people universally enjoy it. I think only a few long-running stories has ever done that. I mean, I pretty much talk about Berserk the most on this channel more than any other manga, and I can't imagine the amount of hate that ending is going to get when it finally gets released after going on for 30 plus years. Everyone has their own version of Berserk in their head, and so it's not going to be for everybody. But instead of ranting about that the entire video, I want to actually get into the chapter and talk about specifics. And one thing that I made sure that I did not do before I started this video, I did not read anyone else's review of this chapter. I did not look at spoilers. I had a couple of pages spoiled for me just seeing it on Twitter, but nothing that ruined the chapter for me, and I wanted to stay away from everyone else's opinion. I did not want any influence going into my head when I read this chapter, and I wanted to share my complete perspectives, which I know are probably not going to be appreciated by a large majority of the fandom, but you know what? It doesn't matter because the series is ending now, and so let's talk about it. Alright guys, so the beginning of this chapter starts out with Eren and Armin within the Paths dimension. One thing I really loved about this part of the chapter was that they increasingly got older as the pages went on, basically kind of going through their whole life cycle that we've seen within the manga, kind of growing up and getting new experiences and kind of changing who they are as people as they go. They're basically walking you through who they were throughout this entire manga. Now, Eren admits to a couple of things. One is that the rumbling was pretty much mostly affected, whereas 80% of the world has absolutely been destroyed. And I want you guys to think about that. I want you guys to think about how much fucking murder that was, how much infrastructure is destroyed, how much world power, how much technology, how much of people's lives have been absolutely destroyed and ruined by the rumbling itself. So this paints the world in a completely different light than where we started this series, whereas, yes, we do have Marley and everything with their advanced technology and everything that they have over on their side, but most of the world has been absolutely destroyed and demolished. So that means the focus kind of moving forward that the world would need to do is rebuilding its infrastructure and rebuilding itself. A lot of people are going to talk about the fact that, well, there should be still war between Marley and the Eldians and everything like that, and we'll get to that in just a moment, but every world power is aware of their priorities when it comes to destruction. Whenever there is destruction that has been had within other countries, that's what they need to focus on. They need to focus on rebuilding themselves before they can even get into that. And for the relation between Paradis and the rest of the world, it leaves off ambiguous, but also with sort of an underlying message of hope in that you cannot erase hatred from people completely. It is an aspect of human nature, though a dark one, it's one that will subsist. However, by being willing to tell the truth and have open communication, there is possibility to lessen it over time, and I think that's the idea here, is that things can't be done in one giant Hail Mary, as in just destroy everything and everything will be okay. Eren was still in the wrong ultimately at the end, but putting everything on an equal playing field and showing that Eldians and Marleyans were able to kind of unify, align, and help fight this greater threat, it does show that there is possibility for unification, but it also tells us that we should be prepared to fight no matter what, because ultimately survival is about fighting to do so. Life is hard, life is struggle, life isn't about just everlasting peace, life isn't about some ultimate freedom on the other side of the ocean that could be anything. Life is hard, brutal, and realistic, and it will beat you into the ground whether you want it to or not. So being prepared to fight if necessary, but also being able to communicate with others is kind of the final statement that I get from this manga. How many problems could have been solved if the people on Paradis that were in charge weren't keeping secrets from everybody, weren't erasing memories, and weren't lying to their communities at large? Just the same, the rest of the world probably still has reason to hate Paradis in a sense. But if the story can be told of what happened, the lineage of the Titans, where they came from, how the powers got passed from one side to the other, how Marley had the Eldians work for them, and how Paradis kind of set itself aside, segregated from the rest of the world, how they believed the world was, as opposed to how the rest of the world understood it. If all that information can actually come out, people can start to make up their own minds, and hopefully moving forward, there will be some progression that is actually able to be had. It's not a perfect solution, but life is not perfect. And I think if anything, Attack on Titan has always shown us that there is no good and there is no evil. There is just human beings, and human beings are capable of both. And usually it's a muddled gray area that we live in. And I'm glad that it didn't just try to ultimately go for, oh, human beings are all at peace or human beings are back to war. It leaves us, well, with this sort of middle ground that Attack on Titan has always sort of pushed, in my opinion. I feel like it's always pushed the complexity because it's always had complex characters that come from different backgrounds that you can understand. You can understand where the Marleyans came from, and you can understand the people of Paradis. You can understand Eren being pushed so far to the point where he would do what he did. I don't think there is a right answer, but I do believe there's an aspect of fighting to survive and understanding that that's all anybody is trying to do. But Eren himself saying that he was willing to kind of take on the burden of being a villain, one, so that his friends could also be seen as heroes, but also it is where Eren did see no other way, and also he was bound to this sort of past, present, future, all connected paths dimension that he was a part of after seeing everything that was going to happen. And I also want to say that one of the major themes, if not the major theme of this series, and there's a lot of themes that this series covers, but it was that of freedom. And Eren being locked in this sort of past, present, future paths dimension, which isn't anything new. We knew that before that this chapter came out, that that's sort of how paths worked, especially with him, is that he took on this role of being this horrifying, destructive Cthulian monster force in order to give the world a common enemy, in order to give his friends the chance to be heroes, and also in order to rid the world of the Titans once and for all. It was the only answer that he saw, and it did deal with a heavy sacrifice on, well, the humanity's part to begin with, and the amount of murder and genocide that he enacted. It's not like the rumbling didn't go through. I mean, people think that the rumbling, should have taken out 100% of the earth. I mean, 80% is pretty damn close. And also, there's no redemption arc here for Eren. He basically kind of admits that this was the path that he saw, this is the path that he had to kind of follow. And again, going back into that theme of freedom, is that Eren didn't really have the freedom that he sought here. However, he was giving that freedom to his friends, and also even in the previous chapters where he was like, look, I'm not going to stop, but you have the freedom to stop me. And this is why he didn't take away the Titan powers that they had with having the founder. He could pretty much have done whatever he wanted to them, but he gave them the freedom to stop him. And I think that's the idea here, is that Eren took away his own freedom, he took away his own will, he took away his own humanity in a way, making himself this absolute terrifying, destructive monster in order to ensure that his friends would have their freedom. And see, freedom being the theme and symbol throughout this entire manga, I think also I have to jump ahead and go to the bird thing. And I know a lot of fans are going to be kind of confused or upset about, oh, Eren turns into a bird. Like, look, it's symbolism, you guys. It's symbolism. All right, this is part of storytelling. I mean, read more novels, read more manga. This is not that weird. What does a bird symbolize? A bird symbolizes, well, one, you can kind of look into it, and there are specific things that each type of bird symbolizes, but primarily birds symbolize freedom. You take the analogy of a bird in a cage, where it's not really a bird. It can't really do what a bird does because it's locked in a cage. But if you take a bird out, you allow it to spread its wings, you allow it to fly high in the sky, you have this kind of symbolism of freedom. People get tattoos of this all the time, of birds, coming out of my cage and things like that. And birds have been prevalent throughout Attack on Titan from the very get-go. There's been many of scenes and panels where we see the bird's eye view of things that are going on. So basically you have humanity doing their little battle war thing, fighting against each other, and there's been shot after shot after shot, panel after panel throughout the entire manga of a bird above it watching over. Now, it's not saying that that bird was Eren, but it's saying, like, from a symbolic point of view, the bird has the freedom to fly over all of this. It doesn't need to be involved in this humanity squabble and whatnot. It doesn't need to be bound to the rules of the society or the governments that are lying to you or anything like that. Birds have absolute freedom because of their wingspan and because they can go wherever they want to at any time. And that's the entire thing that Eren has been fighting for since the beginning of this manga. And he wasn't able to give it to himself, and he knew that he wouldn't be able to give it to himself, but he also knew that he would be able to give it to his friends. Eren kind of like soaring above, like the soaring above imagery of the bird, it's not saying that Eren literally transformed into a bird. It's just the symbolism of birds giving freedom and the relation to that and what he was able to accomplish for his friends. But within that accomplishment, he also destroyed and became a villain in itself, and that's why there's no redemption arc for him, because he cannot be redeemed from the things that he's done. And that's the ambiguity about it, because having ultimate freedom is something that is pretty much impossible within the society of mankind, in both the world of the manga and in our real world, because in order to do it, you have to dominate over the freedom of other people in a way, because you can't have ultimate freedom without intruding on somebody else's, because at some point those freedoms are going to conflict. And as humans, we are flawed beings, and we are all a slave to something in our lives. Now, we talk about the Ymir thing. So when Eren talks about Ymir, so here's what I got out of it. I might be wrong, but again, it's interpretation. So however you want to interpret it is however you do. I think Isayama left it vague, not because he didn't know what he wanted to write. I think he left it vague because he wanted us as the reader to come up with our own reason. So in order for Ymir to finally be at peace and to rest and to eliminate the Titans forever, she has to find some sort of resolution that she was not able to find in life. And for me, what I understand about this is that she said that Mikasa was the key, or Eren said that Mikasa was the key to that, and it doesn't really elaborate as to why. But if you look at it, and he says that, Ymir basically had this Stockholm syndrome where she was in love with her abuser, and this is something that happens. This is something that happens to humans, and we are, in effect, slaves to our love for another person. This happens to people all the time. This isn't just something that came out in a story, or isn't just something that happens because of Stockholm syndrome. How many people do you know or have known that have been in horrible abusive relationships but cannot cut that tie because they are in love? They're a slave to something. They're not free, right? Again, this is just my interpretation of what was happening here, but Mikasa was similar in that way, in that she was always by Eren's side no matter what, even pushing it as far as Eren becoming the monster that he became. And we know that the king was a horrible human being. We know he was a conqueror and everything. And I'm not saying Eren was as bad as the king until the rumbling, right? And so, would Mikasa be able to pull that trigger? Would she actually be able to kill Eren? Would she be able to free herself from that bond and lay Eren to rest? Something that Ymir would not be able to do to the king. Ymir sacrificed her own life to save the king, to save her abuser. But Mikasa, rather than just letting herself die, rather than just letting the world be destroyed, she rose up and was able to free herself from that attachment. But that doesn't mean that she still doesn't love Eren. She did what was best for herself, her own life, to be able to stand on her own and make her own decision. And she did what was best for Eren in that moment, which was to put him out of his misery, to put him out of this horrible kind of situation that he allowed himself to be. Remember, Eren didn't find joy about doing the rumbling. He was pretty much a blank slate. He was doing it because, well, he saw this kind of path in order to kind of get to this point to where the Titans would be eliminated and the world would maybe be able to rebuild itself. But also, by allowing himself to do that, he was broken, man. Even, like, remember the panels that we saw in the last chapter? Just his eyes were vacant. He needed to be put out of his misery, and Mikasa rose up to do that. And she did it with love. Like, she didn't get rid of her love, but she was able to do the right thing in spite of her love. And I don't think Ymir was ever able to do that, and primarily it's because she was brought up to be a slave. She didn't have that mindset. She couldn't do what was right in spite of her love. But Mikasa did. And that's kind of the direction that I'm going at it. And I think Ymir wanted to see that that was possible. She wanted to see that if you could still rise up and be your own person, be free, make the freedom of your own choice, despite the attachment that you felt to another person. And if you look at the different kind of ideologies between Eren and Armin and sort of this middle ground that we get between them, is that, you can't, like I said, you can't give ultimate freedom to a group of people or a person, because at some point it will intrude on somebody else's freedom. You have to kind of build together and communicate. Communication was one of the biggest themes of this entire manga as well, because so many problems could have been solved if people didn't view each other automatically as the enemy, and we were actually able to see our similarities as opposed to our differences. And so moving forward into this new world that we created from the rumbling, unfortunately, this puts pretty much everybody on equal ground and equal footing, where the powers of the Titans are wiped out, and of course technologically we have to rebuild again as well. I'm not saying it's going to last forever. I'm not saying that everybody in the world is going to hold hands now and sing Kumbaya and everything is going to be perfect, but people are on more equal ground than they were before. And because of what they shared before, I'd say Paradis does have more of a chance now than it ever did before. Building a new army, building a new infrastructure, having the same sort of idea of the technology that the world has across the ocean, it just puts them on more equal footing than they were before, but it doesn't give us an ultimate answer. It doesn't say the ultimate answer is going to be peace, and it doesn't say the ultimate answer is going to be war forever, because the world is more complex than that. There isn't one thing or the other. It isn't all of a sudden salvation, and it isn't all of a sudden destruction. We're somewhere in the middle. But without the Titans, there is more of a chance of communication than there ever was before. Some of the other characters to mention, now, I guess one of my only downsides or gripes about this chapter would be that because we only got one chapter to wrap it up, there are some characters I would have liked to see expanded more on. As far as Reiner in particular, because Reiner was my favorite character, and he doesn't really get a whole lot to do in this chapter. And I kind of wanted a little bit more resolution about his kind of internal struggle and feelings, where he was suicidal at one point, and we're kind of left really ambiguous about where he's going to go from here, but he does seem to basically rejoin the Survey Corps, to be part of them once again, be part of that group, and kind of move forwards from there. So I guess that's sort of a positive note to leave Reiner off on, but I would have liked to see way more from his character for that. As far as Historia and her baby, well, it is not the reincarnation of Ymir like I was suspecting. It was pretty much nothing. But it doesn't really bother me. I would have maybe preferred for it to be some sort of reincarnation or something like that, but the fact that it's not isn't going to ruin my day. Historia was able to have a healthy child and move forward, and that child wasn't forced to have the burden of a founding titan passed down to it. So it is, in a way, a clean slate, a clean vessel to move forward in life, so it is what it is. As far as the other characters, Levi does make it through the series alive, even though he's pretty much in a wheelchair now and he's completely torn up from the explosion and everything else that happened to him, but at least Levi is still here, and he was able to give a departing word to his fallen comrades and even shed a little bit of a tear. So I thought that was a good ending for Levi. And again, the ending where we show Mikasa by the tree with the gravestone of Eren and the bird coming down and wrapping the scarf around her. Again, the scarf was always symbolism for Eren kind of taking care of Mikasa, always going to be there for her back and forth. And the fact that the bird came down and wrapped the scarf around her, again, I'm not taking it as literally Eren is that bird and came down and did it. It's just one of those moments where you sort of feel somebody's energy. You feel their comfort and warmth around you even after they die. You can still feel them, they can still be important to you, and you can still love them. I think the bird doing that was like a happy... If you want to be absolutely literal, I think the bird doing that was like a happy coincidence and something that she can relate to the idea that Eren was always going to be with her and always going to be a part of her, that she can live on, and that she's not going to forget him, and that the scarf itself is more important than the bird, because the scarf kind of represents that he's always going to be there with her, always watching over her from wherever he is now. Not from Birdland, but in a spiritual way. And it's not the first time Attack on Titan has done this either. There's been other kind of moments where we've seen Erwin, or we've seen Hanji, or we've seen other characters that are dead now, but kind of an idea that they're still out there in some way, that there's this sort of like spiritual side to it, that there is an afterlife in Attack on Titan or something like that. I think it's meant to be a nice metaphorical ending. I think it's not meant to be taken super literally, and I think it shows that even after horrendous things have happened, that you can still find comfort and peace. Or even after people that you care about that have left you, because let's be honest, Attack on Titan has dealt a lot with death and the idea of death and how to move on in spite of it. And that's what I think is happening with Mikasa here. I think Mikasa made all of her decisions through love, but was able to do the right thing every step of the way, or pretty much every step of the way. She had a few setbacks here and there, but overall she was able to make the hard choices and push forward. So I don't know, guys. Is it a perfect ending? No, it's not perfect. There's definitely things that I would have done differently. But overall, I think sort of the messages that it's getting across made sense to me. I don't know how else to describe it. I definitely can see why this chapter is going to let a lot of people down, but it didn't let me down. I thought it was pretty solid for what it was. And again, I'm looking at this from like a storytelling perspective. I'm looking for symbolism, I'm looking for themes, and I'm looking for ideas that are being told through the story. But I also got to say that, I mean, Attack on Titan is not my favorite manga of all time. It's definitely within my top. Like, I really, really love this series. I really definitely did enjoy it, and I thought it got exceptionally better as it went along. But it's not as close to my heart as something like Berserk or another manga series that I would cover that is like my top 2 or 3. And so maybe I would think differently if it was my top favorite. But I can say for me, as an enjoyer of the series, as somebody that has just enjoyed the journey and has had an interest in seeing, you know, the ideas and perspectives of the characters and how the story relates to war, persecution, subjugation, propaganda, and every other thing that the series tackles, I thought every step of the way it carried on those themes throughout the story. And I think we got to look at, again, the overall legacy of Attack on Titan. This is a series that has touched a lot of people's hearts and has grown a very wide following and will definitely be remembered for many years to come as far as manga goes. It will be hailed as one of the greatest manga of all time. It will be talked about years from now, decades from now. It'll still be an example. It'll still be a staple. People will still be arguing whether or not Eren is the greatest main character of all time. People will still be talking about the anime. When the anime returns next season, a bunch of people that are upset about the manga are still going to tune in and watch the anime and see one of their favorite manga be animated. And I don't think you can judge an entire series based upon one chapter, even if it's the final chapter. You have to look at its legacy and you have to look at it as a whole. How did it make you feel along the way? If it doesn't stick the landing for you, I can understand why that would be upsetting if the series is really close to your heart. But maybe you can step back, and I know right away it's hard to do because chapter just came out. So maybe in a couple of months you can step back and look at the entire series as a whole from start to finish and see how well everything links up together and see how forward that Isayama thought throughout this entire series, which is a very impressive thing to me of how he was able to wrap everything together. But these are just my opinions, and I'm just some dude on the internet. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Whether you liked it or didn't like it is fine. If you didn't like it, that's fine. I'm not going to say your opinion's wrong. Definitely not. It's your opinion, and you are free to interpret it however you want to. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Other than that, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, because all interaction with the video helps it be seen in the algorithm. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Attack on Titan 139 reviews out there, so I'd very much appreciate it. Also check the links in the description for all of my social media, Patreon, Discord, all that fun junk is down below. As always, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.